Hi everyone, it's Jean and Carl. If you're watching this video, you're probably part of a data analytics team. So you're a data engineer or data analyst, maybe you're a data scientist, or you're focused on governance. And even though you're delivering valuable work, you may find yourself stuck in a painful loop where you spend a lot of your time fixing things instead of building new solutions. Your team is perhaps blamed for slow delivery, even though you spend most of your time on support. And every new solution that you deliver actually increases your workload instead of reducing it. So we want to tell you today that you're not actually failing. You're just being set up as firefighters in a system that guarantees burnout and creates an environment with shrinking budgets. So everything you do becomes harder because you have less to work with continuously. Jean and I have both lived this. Across our careers, we kept hitting the same walls, delivering great work, only to be swallowed by support once those things got deployed. And operational issues, endless firefighting became our reality. And projects that should have moved the business forward ended up just pulling us all backwards. Jean, tell us what it was like for you.
Yeah, Cole, it was challenging to say the least. I think it's almost feel like you're walking into a battle that you were guaranteed to lose. Yet you showed up every single day hoping things will change. I don't know why why we did it, and why I did it for so long, but we used to refer to this as organized chaos, where there was some structures in place. Yes, we did follow some, basic guidelines. We had demand management systems in place, but everything was just burning the whole time.
Mm,
Funnily enough, they used to call me Groenie,
mm.
which was named after a children's cartoon of a little dragon that always wanted to put out all the fires that his family started. It felt the same way, right? In a corporate environment, is I wanted to put out the fires that all my colleagues started in business. Yeah, not ideal, not
Yeah,
ideal at all.
awesome. So today, I'm going to ask Jean to help me unpack why this happens and what the real root cause is, and how data teams can escape the firefighter trap before it destroys your credibility, it removes budgets, and actually makes you feel like your job is at risk. And what I want to say before we jump in is that this is not the traditional thing. We're not going to talk about demand management systems and agile processes and how to do change management and how to, because those things don't actually fix the problem.
Mm.
You have to get to the roots of the issue, and that's what we're going to do today. John, tell us why this topic is so important.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it's very close to my heart. I think I've seen way too many teams fail at this in every organization that I've worked in. Saw high performance data people drowning in fires. I mean, it's weird, the concept of drowning in a fire, but if you see it, it's like the water, like the depth doesn't change, the
Yeah.
fire just persists. I mean, we were in an environment where business loved what we built. We enjoyed building complex data solutions. I think that was one of the biggest things that, we took pride in the things that we've built.
Mm,
We wore our burnout like badges of honor.
mm,
It's we always competed around who could clock the most overtime in a month and get the
mm,
most stuff done.
mm,
Every new insight that we created even more operational chaos.
mm,
Budgets shrank because no measurable value was actually ever being shown.
mm,
And the problem is, the more that we delivered, the more we burned. It is one of the
mm.
things is you were just trying to clear your plate every single day, but it
Yeah,
just kept coming and just kept coming. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's for the audience that's listening. I mean, it's the things that you would typically see, or the environment that you'll find yourself in, is you spent most of your life trying to fix other people's problems.
Mm,
As most data people and most IT people, we like solving problems and we like alleviating pain for other people.
mm,
But this is to our own detriment. The problem is we then get pulled into every single emergency that isn't even us. It's not even
mm,
related to what we're doing. We
mm,
get criticized for slow delivery, and while drowning in just continuously supporting the things that we have built.
mm,
The weird thing is we enjoy the credit for being seen as the problem solver and the trusted
mm,
person that always gets the job done. But this then creates key person dependencies, right? So people always come to you. You always get,
Yeah,
you're always the one on whose desk the work lands. And
that's
this
right.
is to your own detriment because you get overloaded. You can't keep up with the demand. Your new work stops coming your way because leadership doesn't trust your capacity anymore. Like in the beginning, people kept giving you stuff because they liked you and you felt valued. Now work starts coming out a lot slower. You start making a whole lot more mistakes, and then things start slowing down, not just for you, but for your team as well.
Mm,
And I mean, it's the net effect of this is then budgets get cut because no one can see the measurable value that's coming out of the team, and you almost live in this constant fear of either being retrenched or fired, and
mm,
even though that it isn't your fault, you
mm.
really pushing those numbers
Yeah,
of clearing the board, but the
yeah,
value that you're adding
yeah.
is not clear. And the problem is, and the truth here is, it's not me that was failing or the team that was failing. The problem is we were operating in a system that sets us up for failure. And
Mm,
and for the people that's listening, it's not you that's failing.
mm,
Um, you're just operating in the system that sets you up for firefighting, while the focus is anything but real value creation, right? It's just the way
mm.
that the system has been
Yeah,
created because the system doesn't focus on value,
yeah.
unfortunately.
John, that whole fear of retrenchment thing was very real for you,
Mm,
right? And you lived quite close to that for a large part of your career. So you really felt the brunt of um, living in an environment where my job is always at question. And I think
mm,
that's a reality for a lot of people, which, talks to the short, you know, chief data officers, chief data analytics officers being the shortest tenure by far, less than 2 years versus 5 years when we talk about data leaders versus other executives, average tenures.
mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally I've gone through 15 rounds of retrenchment since I started my career.
Mm.
Sometimes more than once a year. It's just it's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
insane.
chaos. It's
Yeah, you've
organized
lived this,
chaos.
man. You've lived this.
Yeah.
So today we want to show you, um, to you watching, how firefighting isn't a symptom, it's a system failure that's directly tied to what we call value framing. So today we're going to give you a roadmap to escape it by using the rapid value cycle and the data value assurance framework, and it's going to change your life. We want to jump into some just personal experiences here, and I want to relate a story that I went through in this space. I was working for one of South Africa's largest media and entertainment companies, and my team was we owned five major projects, the most important projects that were going to drive the company forward, while the company was going through a tough time. But simply because our value framing was weak, the more we delivered, the more fires we created. So the business loved the insights we produced, and we really made an impact with some of the things. I mean, we really we identified hundreds of millions in lost revenue through the revenue assurance model that we built. It was incredible. But that love of what we did came with a heavy cost. It resulted in an endless dependency and zero support capacity. So we were given a budget to do certain things, but we were never given the opportunity to increase that budget when we needed
Mm,
to support the solutions, because we never framed the value in a way that allowed the business leaders that had to sign off on the budgets to be able to understand what the real value was, not the deemed value, because we you cannot hide value. You have to display the value very clearly, and that's where we made a mistake. So our support requirements just exploded. We worked 250 to 300 hours each in 1 month to try and pull the deadline and get the next phase of the project approved. And it was so bad that the client eventually forced us to take leave to avoid burnout. It affected our families, our health, our mental well-being, but these were all just ignored because we were so desperately trying to stay afloat. At one point, I asked my team if anyone owned a fireman's suit, because I genuinely wanted us to walk into the next steering committee meeting dressed as firefighters, because that's all we really were. Incredible data people with so much capability, but really just chasing our tails, trying to
mm,
keep the lights on. And what I realized is that the business, the CFO, the financial people, the stakeholders, they don't care about your firefighting. They cared about um, that we couldn't justify the budget we were asking for because, and we only realized later that it's because we never framed the measurable value we created. So this is when I realized that insights are a weak outcome. They're a poor outcome. Actionable insights is not the target for a data analytics function. If you can't articulate the value that you're creating in real terms, like revenue, cost savings, risk reduction, and efficiency gains, real efficiency gains, then the CFO will always look at you as a cost center, and your and support requests will basically bury you alive. Jean,
Mm.
tell us a story.
Yeah, I think for me the most interesting one was very early on in my career. The problem is when you straight out of varsity and you get into corporate, you don't really know what the norm is and what's acceptable versus what's not acceptable. So very early on in my career, I got involved in business critical reporting for non-voice services. So this would typically be like your data transmission lines. Um, and this required the building and maintenance of multiple data sets, platforms, data marts, had to build views, created a lot of analytical scripts. And I was so proud of the complexity of all these things that I've built. But the problem with this is I had to maintain this for 20 products, where some I had to deliver weekly, some I had to deliver monthly. It had to be done on a certain day of the month. In the beginning, it was really just an exercise of just show us some data. We haven't seen it before. Just show us some data. And the problem is, it quickly then turned into a 24/7 problem where I had to run these reports and
Mm,
scripts manually, sometimes multiple times on the 5th of every month, just to make sure
mm,
that things get through. Then there's errors that comes in, or the data wasn't refreshed like it was supposed on the data platforms. Sometimes business will add new products that they didn't tell us about. So all your products start skewing. You see, like 1 month, all of a sudden there's a drop off, but the product codes have changed. Everything was done on codes. You had to address the data quality issues. You had to sit in steerco meetings to try and justify your figures and your numbers continuously. And the problem is you get so entrenched in doing these things that burnout was like it was actually guaranteed, right? There was
mm,
no way that a normal person could do
mm.
this stuff and sustain it. And this was just one of many things that you were doing. And the
Yeah.
problem is at that point, I mean, I was very junior and I didn't know what was acceptable in terms of workload. I didn't know what that looked like. I just felt like, I need to do something.
Mm,
I felt great every time somebody said, "Wow, job great." Just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep doing the stuff. And for me, it just became this thing of just closing those tickets and focusing on how many of those tickets I could close at the end of every day. And
mm,
the problem was I never questioned the value of the work I was doing.
mm,
I never actually sat down to think about, if I'm delivering these things, what are people actually doing with it after the fact? The problem is even my management team, they just gave us measurements of just make sure you clear your tickets as quickly as possible, right? These are the SLAs we have with business. Make sure that the stuff gets delivered within that SLA. Never really focusing on why are we doing the things that we are doing. So,
mm.
from an emotional perspective, I not only felt overwhelmed, this was sort of, a lot of stuff at the same time. I felt like I was dropping the ball. At the same time, dealing with imposter syndrome because everybody else just looked like they were like taking like fish to water. For them it was a norm, like just burn out continuously. I felt, well, I need to keep up because obviously I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I was allowed to raise any concerns around workload, or if people were going to look at you differently if you say something.
Yeah.
At the same time you're doing this, then you feel unseen, you feel undervalued. And even
Hmm.
though that you're burning the candle at both ends, you get into this bad mind space,
Mm.
because you get stuck in execution so much that you don't have any capacity to deal with any of these emotions. You don't have any time to deal with stress
Yeah. And
or
and that
anger,
thing,
anxiety. Yeah.
Jean, as that thing goes up the chain of command, right?
Mm.
All the work that you're doing, it sounds very critical, right? In your sort of direct sphere of influence, but
Yeah.
when it ends up in an exco meeting or in a board meeting, the way it gets spoken about is, oh, Jean is doing good work for the company,
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
But
Yeah.
but the problem is that that doesn't get you the support that you need in order to create the what do we call it? You actually need more people to help you to carry the burden, right? You need
Mm,
proper developers to come and build the things that need to be in place so that you don't have to run the scripts manually.
mm.
You need good software to schedule things, but you're so constrained because the discussion at the board level or the exco level is he's doing great work.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
the discussion was he's adding a lot of value and this is how much value he's adding, it's a completely different discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. And I think the main problem there is also the way that we actually tracked employees, right? So we focused so much just on delivery and not understanding what we were doing and why we are
Yes,
doing it and how
yes.
it relates back to value, that everything in the process was just designed badly from the beginning, right? So if you're working really hard, the reward system is not how much value did the data team add. It was, did they clear the tickets on time, and was the platform available for
That's
99.99999%?
it. Yeah.
Which these things don't talk back to the concept of value at all. And I
Mm,
think the outcome for me from this was this was one of the main catalysts for understanding that what value transformation looks like. If we can't relate what we do to what business expects, we will stay busy and not deliver anything. I mean, it's we will
mm,
work countless hours, build complex systems, do all the system integration, do all the fancy stuff, do the bells and
mm,
whistles, bring in new technology.
mm.
If it's agentic AI, whatever it might be, there's always something. The problem is we take pride in technical complexity rather than the value that we enabled, and
Yeah,
that creation becomes the grave that you actually bury yourself in. It's
that's right.
it's that proverbial death by a thousand cuts to your
Mm.
own career effectively.
That's that's incredible, right? And
Yeah.
and it's so powerful because we find it so difficult as data folk, as data professionals, to translate what we do into terms that the stakeholders, the business leaders really understand, right?
Mm,
And how do I take that, this thing that I do, this component, this plumbing that I have to do, this governance system that I have to, approach that I have to implement, or this pipeline that I have to build? How do I translate that back to value? And that's really the crux of the issues
mm,
is getting there. So tell us a bit about where you experienced severe budget cuts and where you became really close to retrenchment
mm,
challenges. Like you said, you faced this retrenchment challenge 15 times in your career. I'm sure everybody
mm.
would love to hear, what that felt like.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing that I can say about retrenchment is I think it's almost better getting retrenched than being told that you are a critical employee and you just stick
You're just
around
back in
for
the system.
you just back in the system and you take the beating, right? Because
Yeah.
five people end up leaving and you end up doing five people's work. But I mean, it's so I think for me the probable, where I felt the most pressure around this is when you're on your own, you're affected by this. It's bad, but it's still manageable. But what really got to me was very soon after I took over a senior role, and I looked after multiple data practices, right? So we had multiple platforms, multiple practices within the organization, and overnight I became responsible for three or four of these functions. Is at that point the company started going through major restructuring, and even though the team we were so entrenched in a major project, I can remember that. I mean, it's again like, how do we measure stuff? This was one of those things when we're spending 2 million rand a day on this project, so this is probably like a very important project. Nobody really thought about what's the value that's going to come out of this 4 year project, running at that burn rate. But this meant is, the team, the DBAs, the developers started pushing 200 to 300 hours per individual in a month. Over extended periods of time, we had labor issues in terms of, you're not allowed to work more overtime than certain things. But the problem is the show needs to go on. The system doesn't stop. And because of this run rate and the investment, everybody just needs to do their bit. And the problem is you end up being in the line of fire, and at the same time you need to justify your existence. Why am I here? Why does my team exist? The problem is at the same time, we had to push through a lot of business cases to get stuff done in support of these bigger projects. And all of those business cases was really, business supports us, and the focus was enablement. It was never really about value at all. It's we need to do this because business wants to do X, Y, and Z. There was never a clear point of value. And while we were working hard, clocking the overtime, supporting business and IT initiatives, but value wasn't our core focus. So the problem here is we measured our success based on Microsoft project plans and the backlogs that came our way, and how quickly we can clear those backlogs, and that effectively became our North Star. we started focusing on delivery solely rather than anything value related, or actually focusing on, are we still doing the right things? And you got so busy that we really couldn't really defend it at that point in time.
Mm.
Then at the same time, you now need to fight to justify performance ratings of highly skilled individuals because the company is not performing like it's supposed to. Yeah, you have people pushing 200 to 300 hours per month. Now I need to tell the guy, listen, because the company is not performing well, I need to rate you down because we're doing a bell curve adjustment, right? So you can imagine this. You're really burning people out. You
Mm.
yourself, or you're burning out. Then you tell people, sorry, you're not good enough. Although you're putting all this time and effort in, we think because the company is not doing well, you're not doing well.
Mm.
And this happened multiple times. And the problem with this is it got me to that first point where the retrenchments now became real because now I had to identify people in my team that I no longer needed.
Mm.
Being called into a meeting that said, listen, we can't carry the cost anymore. You need to choose 10 people. Okay, but based on what? I mean, based on performance, because obviously you're changing the performance ratings,
Mm.
what do you base it on? And the problem is this led to dismantling of the data analytics function and data teams multiple times. And we ended up
Mm.
not just losing that, but we lost a lot of top talent over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think for me the main the feeling that it evoked, the emotion that it got from me was, it's not just the fear of having to retrench people or to identify people that needs to be retrenched, but you yourself,
Mm.
being on the in the line
Mm.
of fire where you're not performing because your team is not performing,
Mm.
despite all the hard work and the effort and doing everything else that was expected from you. Look, you did everything right, and you
Mm.
still failed. And the problem there is you feel defeated and you just need to carry on,
Yeah.
as there's no other options that seem feasible,
Mm.
at that
Mm.
point in time. And I mean, it's what I learned was is executives cut what they don't understand, and they don't understand the value unless you frame it.
Yeah.
If you don't show that value to them,
Exactly.
they're going to cut it. That's why it became so easy to just cut the data teams, to always
Mm.
put them in the line of fire, to put retrenchments
Mm.
in and make people redundant. I mean,
Mm.
it's imagine this scenario where, you're only allowed to have two intermediates and two seniors in a team, but now you have 10 people and they can barely keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And now you need to decide which two are you keeping because the others need to go.
It's crazy.
Um, yeah,
Yep.
and I mean, and this sort of led then towards that foundation of, the data value assurance mindset around whatever you do needs to relate back to value at the end of the day, right?
Mm.
Because it not just sets you up to protect yourself, but
Mm.
if you're responsible for data teams or broader teams, it also helps you secure the investment, the funding, and the support that you need to look after those teams in the long run as well. So when
Yes.
these things come along, you don't just need to show them, but if we're cutting this, we're cutting the salary cost and what the implication is. You can show them the impact on value, and
That's
then it
it.
becomes a bit more difficult to cut people,
Yeah.
to a greater extent.
Awesome. Cool. How do we fix this then? So we're going to cover four main areas where you can make an impact in your company immediately by changing your mind and your approach about how you see yourself, how you see your team, and how you can grow your impact and your influence in the company. So the first thing that we find is that the core problem really is around this firefighter issue, is that the business treats the data teams similar to how they would treat IT or support, or because the data team, that's how we position ourselves, right? And if that's
Mm,
how we position ourselves, that's
yep.
how we will be treated. What we also find is that firefighting grows in proportion to delivery when insights are not embedded. So what happens is it's hard to get support for the business to be self-sufficient with the insights that we're using, because often we need additional budget that we didn't foresee at the time, but we cannot get that additional budget that we need in order to embed something and make it part of the business process, because we haven't been able to justify the value of what we've produced. And so the answer is usually no. And so when there's no measurable value, there is no justification for additional budget, because that's how budgets are allocated. They're allocated based on potential value, not based on clever arguments. Um, we also find that as at the core of the problem is that insights are a weak outcome. Insights create dependency. They don't create value. So when we're producing insights for the business, but we haven't embedded those insights and made sure that the business is adopting those and using those in the processes almost they have no other choice but to use those insights in their processes. We've just created a dependency on ourselves. And initially that feels good, but it very quickly leads to burnout. And without alignment, this is another core issue is without alignment between the business function, the IT function, and the data analytics function, every delivery becomes operational debt. So this is why so many projects get done that never end up being used in the long term. So many analytics projects, so many insights projects get done without being used in the long term because there is too much manual stuff happening in order to keep the lights on. And there's people dependencies and there's system things have to get run at night. And because the business or the stakeholders cannot make the investments that are required to systemize and automate these things because the value from them isn't clear.
Yep.
John, take us through the next one.
Yeah, so I mean, it's your probably your best escape mechanism is leveraging the rapid value cycle, the rapid value framework, and this really starts with that point of the concept of investing confidently. This is where firefighting begins and where you can prevent those fires, right? Where if the team doesn't come up with proper value hypothesis around when you're building things, if we're not tying what we are doing back to the concepts of revenue increase or cost reduction or risk mitigation or efficiency, then we're going to lose the plot. So these are the things that you can start doing upfront. I think what's also important is making sure that upfront you have commitments from your IT business and data teams. Make sure that when you're building something, that the people downstream that's going to be using it or where you think they're going to be using it is part of the conversation, and you already preempt those conversations around what needs to be done. And it's very difficult. This is probably one of the more complex things to do is making sure that you secure at least mandate and sponsorship from day one for the projects that you are doing, because this will ensure alignment, budget justification, as well as clarity of what that ownership then actually looks like at the end of the day. The second one comes when you're actually focusing on delivering that insights. The key question you need to ask yourself is, are these insights directly tied to measurable value? If what you are building is not clearly linked back to some concept of value somewhere in the system, you are actually building the fire. You are fueling the fire effectively, right? And I don't know if anybody's watched that movie Backdraft, but it's not fun having to deal with fires when people start opening doors, right? So make sure that you start not just prevent it, but stop future fires from happening. The third one is around the concept of applying insights, and this is where most teams fail. Is you build something, but you don't really embed it. And Carl, you said it a bit earlier. I mean, it's the value comes when you start embedding that insights, not just delivering the actionable insights, but making sure that processes change to adapt to this input. You've got IT support from a system perspective to make sure that you're entrenching the outputs thereof and the actions that gets automated. Business behavior starts shifting based on the information that you're giving them. And the challenge here is that without senior mandate, this entire step collapses. So you really need support from someone to make this work. And once you've got this done, I mean, it generates huge support to alleviate that burden at the end of the day. And then the fourth one is around the concept of recognizing value. And this is where now, once you've built the stuff and you've prevented the fires and you're putting the thing in to make sure that you continuously get value from what you're doing, is the concept of building that data income statement. And if a team can show what you are doing, that there's revenue uplift, risk reduction, efficiency gains, when you communicate this message, the CFO now starts to see investment. They don't see cost, right? They don't look at you and see, dollar signs being depleted from their budget. They actually see dollar signs being added, which means you're setting yourself up for better conversations. So supported budgets become a whole lot easier. Headcount growth becomes justified. I mean, it's in my instances where I got stuck is if I took this approach, I would not have dealt with those same things. I would not have been stuck in the same rut for 4 years, just delivering the same thing over and over and over again. Cool. I mean, it's with all these things and the challenges that I'm facing is there perhaps a role or someone that can come in that can fix it?
The ultimate firefighter.
Yeah.
The firefighter to end all fires. Well, this is what we want to make sure that we embedding and leaving with you, as the listeners, as the audience, you really need to think about yourself as what we call a data value architect, as the role that um, uh, uh, comes to the rescue to solve these problems once and for all in the business, really applying the rapid value cycle into the organization and achieving certain key things as part, as a foundational part of making sure that you're successful as a data analytics function. And those things are framing value, so understanding how to communicate value and how to
Mm.
talk about value to the business in the way that they understand it, not the way that you think it needs to be understood. The alignment, like Jean said, between data business and IT, all the way from the point where business are making investment decisions, right the way through to embedding those insights and then recognizing that value with value attribution and understanding which component of the business contributed which components of the value so that you can continue investing where the value is coming from. See, often we find that business functions are getting recognition for the value that is generated by data analytics functions. And so that's why it's so hard for data
Mm.
analytics functions to justify for additional budget, because you're not, the business doesn't see you as the value generator. The role of the data value architect makes sure that you get seen as the value generator, or at least a component of the value creation. And then securing that mandate becomes the role of the data value architect. So getting in the faces of the senior leadership and helping them to understand why it's so important that they communicate the requirement for this project, how it's going to change the business, how it's going to create value, and then issuing the mandate that says, this is an important part, getting those OKRs and KPIs aligned so that leaders that you have to work with across the different functions are all aligned to what you're doing, and then protecting that value focus, that delivery focus, right? Not getting distracted by every other thing that we built in the past or that we want to build in the future, or this, that, or other fancy models, but we keep that focus on the value delivery, and which will enable proper embedding. Because once we get this focus, the singular focus, super focus on creating value, then we become very focused on embedding that value and making sure the business can use that. And then finally, with the data value architect, that role has to produce the data income statement, which is the report that the CFO needs in order to see very clearly this is the value that was created. So the
Mm.
role of the data value architect is, this is the person who ensures that value is clear, that it's measurable, and that it's owned across the different
Mm.
functions. Jean, what can people do? What practical shifts can they make to reduce firefighting immediately?
Yeah, so just quickly, practical steps. I think the first one is making sure that every project that you start starts with measurable value or a concept thereof. I mean, you don't have to need to have the exact rands and cents, but you need to have a clear indication of, is it going to add value or not, and have a ballpark. Ballpark figures are sometimes, more often than not, a lot better than having exact figures, right? And I think
Mm.
that's why we tend to shy away from committing to them, is because we're uncomfortable
Not
committing
always
to
sure.
value.
Yeah.
Secondly, is building a value backlog, not a feature backlog, right? Is to
Mm.
say, but these are the things that's really going to add value, rather than focus on the 100 things that you need to do just to clear from a backlog perspective. If you focus on the things that adds value, you can instantly incrementally start focusing on the things that, and this helps you prioritize in a different dimension, rather than making sure, because we always only focus on, like, what's going to be the cost, the complexity, and that's what we do for prioritization. If you're bringing value as a dimension, it helps you
Mm.
clear the backlog a whole lot better, but it'll also make sure that you're setting yourself up for success to reduce that
Mm.
firefighting. Stop using the words actionable insights or insights,
Mm.
and start focusing on revenue, increased revenue uplift, cost reduction, risk reduction or risk mitigation. There's even this nice thing about, what do we call it, value at risk, right? So if you don't do something, what value will you probably lose? If you
Mm.
start shifting your mindset towards that and start talking about that, that is a whole lot more effective.
Mm.
Just the fourth one is justified support with measurable value, not emotion, right? The problem is we
Mm.
always want to have this, oh, but we love these people and we enjoy working with them. The CFO doesn't care about your team if you deem them to be family or what's happening back at home. They can focus on, are you delivering value, yes or not?
Yeah.
So it's relationships are important, but it's not going to secure yourself. I mean, I've been through this multiple times. Having good relationships is not a surefire way of making sure that you're going to skip retrenchments. Lastly, is just make sure that you position the data function as a strategic value center, not a cost center. Right? Even if you don't directly turn into a profit center or deliver profit, you deliver value or you contribute towards the delivering of value. And if you're doing value attribution, as you spoke about, where in the value chain, our business gets benefit from it, but you contribute a portion to that value creation at the end of the day. If you start focusing on that and communicate that back to business, it instantly sets you up in a better way that firefighting doesn't become the thing that overwhelms you. It also doesn't become the thing that drives you every single day, every single moment, because value now prioritizes the work that you're doing, not just people asking questions.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, listeners, finally, we want you to think about one project that you're working on right now and ask yourself the question, have I made the value visible? If not, that's the first thing that you can change. So if you want some help becoming a data professional who delivers clearly demonstrated value, click on the link below and join us in building your personal value narrative using the rapid value cycle.